Hello, Widowhood. Our guest today is Miss Deb Brown. She is the Director of Grief Information for Teachers and Services. She advanced grief recovery methods, specialist, published author, trainer, writer, and former head teacher. Grief Information for Services. They teach adults to help children to deal with their emotions associated with loss, any kind, such as death, divorce, moving, school, and many other losses. Deb, thank you and welcome to being here to the Widowhood.
Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner. Share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Tina.
Hi, Tina. Thank you for having me.
So, how did you get into this?
The first thing that happened was I received a telephone call from a parent going into palliative care when I was a head teacher. And of course, that meant that that young person was about to lose their mum. And I'd lost my mum only a few years before that. So a deep empathy came from me. I was 38 when my mum died, and it was horrendous, an awful thing. And so I was really worried for this young person who was about to lose their parent at the age of 8 or 9. So that started a journey for me, researching what support is there out there for children. At the time, I'd been a head teacher for only a few weeks, but I'd been involved in the world of education for over 20 years. And it made me realise when I received that call from that parent that actually I didn't have any qualifications or skills to be able to support children through a bereavement. And it made me think, well, why don't we have those skills? Where is the training? What do I need to know? We can be empathetic on the telephone, and I really do believe that most teachers are incredibly empathetic and supportive and understanding and want to do the best to support children. But with what? With what tools? So gratefully, I started to research, and after all sorts of dead ends in terms of the paths that I was finding, I came across the grief recovery method. And the rest is history in many respects. The grief recovery method is wonderful. I became a grief recovery method specialist about 6 or 7 months after that. We had a lady called Catherine Best, who is heavily involved in the grief recovery team in the UK. She came to help us deliver a course called Helping Children with Loss at our school. We trained quite a few of the staff and consequently supported lots of the children. So that was the start of my journey, and it's continued to get better and better since.
Wow. When you look, thank you for explaining that. Oftentimes, when people hear the word grief, they think it is solely related to the death of a loved one. How did you transition that word beyond that scope?
I'm glad you asked that question because you'll notice that I use the word bereavement because I was looking for bereavement support at the time. Several of my losses were bereavement. My mum died in 2013 of breast cancer, and my sister died in 2016 of cryptogenic liver failure. I knew that children who were either bereaved or going to be bereaved needed support. I hadn't realised until I came across the grief recovery method that actually there's a lot of children grieving who are, for example, in a situation where their parents are divorcing or separating, children who are moving house or moving schools often are forgotten about in terms of how sad they feel about the friends they're about to lose because they're moving a school. Often, if somebody is moving school, they're moving area, so they're also moving house. And there are multiple losses, we call them secondary losses, that I don't think a lot of people realise children are attempting to deal with. And I really do think that we've got a lot more learning to do when it comes to how we support children through those different types of loss.
I would certainly agree. You made mention of something I would like to dive into, that children are forgotten in this process. Why do you think that is, and how can one recognize that they have forgotten their child in this process?
I think the reason why children are often forgotten is that when we have a situation where we are dealing with grief ourselves as adults, whatever the loss, we are deeply sad or deeply angry or deeply frustrated or deeply shocked. There's so many different potential emotions that we are self-absorbed in those moments. And our children are often in the way of that grief. To give you an example of that, when my mum died, and again when my sister died, my children my husband comes from a slightly different area in the UK from me. I'm from Manchester and he's from Newcastle. And
Mhm.
so they went up to Newcastle with their dad to see their grandparent whilst I had took time to grieve alone. What I hadn't realised at the time was that grieving alone wasn't serving me. It certainly wasn't serving my children. And it gave the wrong impression to my children that my grief was more important to theirs and that my grief was something that I needed to do alone. Of course, they were only gone for 2 days, and when they come back, I think that they were expecting me to be back and happy and okay again because they were only young at the time of my mum and sister's deaths. And I was still sad. So I was still self-absorbed. I was still very, very upset and very worried and in a deep grief state on both occasions. Both of my children went straight back to school after the deaths of my mum and my sister. And now, having been on the side of a head teacher when that has happened, my concern with that is that I understand that families have to do that. There are so many things that we have to do when we are dealing with grief and loss. It's incredible how busy we are preparing for funerals or in a separation. Often there's finances to deal with, the sale of houses, there's all sorts. So the adults are incredibly busy. When children are sent immediately back to school, schools are ill-equipped in terms of how to deal with the children, what to say, whether they're allowed to talk about it, not allowed to talk about it. Are they allowed to discuss it with them? What do they say when the children arrive back to school? And I think that there's a lot to be done in terms of giving adult practitioners, professionals, the tools to be able to support the children in those situations.
Thank you. What type of tools do you provide, and how does a teacher or a parent recognize that their child is not being just a child, but this is actually their lamenting, their grieving, their bereavement coming up to play?
Grief is incredibly complicated and everybody grieves differently and everybody has the right to grieve differently. And children also grieve. Sometimes we might see a change in behaviour. If a child is really quiet, we might suddenly get some acting out. If a child is usually the sort of child who is active and engaged at school, they might suddenly not want to be engaging in school, or they're finding it difficult to concentrate because they're worrying about the fact that there has been a bereavement or a different type of loss. So I have been very busy writing journals to attempt to support schools, practitioners, parents, and give them some ideas of the sorts of activities that we might do with children who are going through a loss of any kind. I'm 5 journals in to the Lessons in Loss series. The first one was Kids' Helpful Guide When Parents Separate. We then published very bravely Kids Helpful Guide when a loved one dies by suicide.
Mm.
We then published Kids Helpful Guide when a pet dies. When a pet dies, it's often the first bereavement that a child will experience. We have since published Kids Helpful Guide when a loved one is seriously ill, and Kids Helpful Guide when a loved one is terminally ill. The seriously ill and terminally ill books are very close to our hearts because my sister was in hospital for a period of 12 months, at which point she really didn't come home very often. She was so poorly. And that was a really difficult time for us as a family, trying to get to the hospital, making sure that there was somebody to visit her on a daily basis was challenging. The children found it difficult, and both of my children have been involved in providing some activities for the book because they can look back at what it was like for them.
Mm.
So has even edited one of them. So my son and daughter are both sort of helping us with the editing process. So it's a bit of a family. Well, it is a family affair, really. So I've got a couple of the books that I can certainly show on screen. If you would like, it might be useful for me to show a couple of the activities, just in case any of your listeners would like to see the sorts of things that might be useful when a child is presenting as grieving. Sometimes it's really important to know that some children do not present as grieving at all. So they present as I am fine and I am okay and I can deal with this and there is no change in behaviour at all. That doesn't mean they're not grieving. It means potentially that child has gone into be strong mode, very much I am okay, I'm fine, that lid back on. And that can be to do with adults modelling that type of behaviour. It can also be to do with the child's personality. There's lots of complications about that. So I think that even if the child is not necessarily presenting with any different behaviour, we need to be cautious and not assume that they're coping just because there's no change. And these books, we hope, my brother and I are very busy writing them, and we really hope that they provide some guidance to the adult to support the child. Most of the tasks are intended to be independent, but we are in the process of writing adult support guides to go with the journals, just for those adults who would like a little bit more guidance in terms of the sorts of things to say with the child through the journey of the journal, really. So this is the first one.
Okay.
And this is called When Parents Separate. We called it Kids Survival Guide. We've since changed the name of them to Kids Helpful Guides. So to give you an idea of one of the tasks, before the separation of my parents, they would often. So what we're suggesting here is to the children, let's look back at the relationship of the parents. What was their presenting behaviours? Then we might, and you'll notice these are colouring in sheets. So there are some mindfulness activities within within all of the journals for the children to have some downtime, relaxing time, that sort of thing. Then the next task says, when my parents separated, I felt. So this is about the child's feelings. How did they feel? One of the problems I think that we have in society, most people are not honest about their feelings. We're not good, are we, at saying, you know what, when you said that, you made me feel, or when you did that, you made me feel. What tends to happen is we bubble up, and then we've got some sort of reaction, and often those reactions aren't positive. So we give the children an opportunity to write about how they're feeling. And the books are created in a way where I do my example. So it's a teach my example, child gets the chance to do theirs, teach, do. And so one of the other things we talked about, adults supporting the children through this. One of the tasks we've put in is about the children thinking about who might that adult be? Who is your trusted adult? And what is a trusted adult? It's okay. We've got a few pages on explaining to the child, you know what? It's okay to feel however you feel. If you feel angry, often anger is an emotion that is seen as really negative. But you know what? It might be that the child feels like they're angry with mum because of the the fallout with mum and dad, or they're angry with dad because he's moved out. And that's actually an okay feeling during that time of the separation. Yet we often insist to children that anger is a negative emotion. Obviously, we don't want children to stay in that negative emotion. So, one of the tasks is about considering our reactions and that our reactions are our responsibility. Your response, your responsibility. There's a task in the book about how to take some responsibility for our actions to things that happen to us and how can we get out of that and how can we make it better. A couple of things to get out of those feelings. We've got some breath work. This is a breathing in and out activity, thinking about the special times that we've shared with our grown
Mm.
to bring back that positivity into the relationships that are potentially a little bit broken.
You guys have done an extensive amount of work and research to put this together. How long did it take you to compile these, and how did you research and come about developing the book?
I have been writing a book about how to support children through loss since 2018. It's about 70,000 words in. And I was going to publish that book first. And then I realized, having spoken to lots of practitioners, all sorts of people attend the Helping Children with Loss course. It's not necessarily just for people who work in schools. In fact, it was originally created by the Grief Recovery Institute for parents. What that did was it created a lot of interest, really, from the local area. And they used to phone me, "Mrs. Brown, have you got any resources?" After the course, often people say, "Is there any resources that you've got? Is there any resources?" And I thought, when I was writing the book, I thought, you know what? We need resources. What could they look like? And hence we came up with the idea of writing journals for children. That's where it came from. And so in terms of the research, we're 7 years in really before we've got to a point where we're actually getting them down on paper and writing and starting to publish. So it seems like they don't take very long because we're now attempting to publish a book every 6 to 8 weeks so that we can get them all out as quickly as possible. But the background work has taken a long time to get to this stage.
As it should, as it should. The training that you provide, I think you said that it is available for people in the education arena, but is it available to anyone at large? And how do they register or sign up? Is this virtual or in person?
It's a good question. We can do it both. So I am an advanced grief recovery method specialist. So advanced grief recovery method specialist trained to deliver the course online. And the Helping Children with Loss course, predominantly now, because I have people interested from all over the world, uh, I do most of it online. It is doable in person, so you can meet people in person. And there have been times when I've gone to a school where the head teacher have contacted me and said, "I need this for everybody. Can you come and do it? Can you come and deliver it to my staffing team?" That's a yes usually. And so that would lend itself better to an in-person training. What does it look like in terms of how do people get in touch? We do have a website. It's called lessonsinloss.com. It's straightforward to find. It's probably easier to find me via email, debbie@lessonsinloss.com, to inquire about the course. Usually I will do it bespoke to the company or the school or the establishment that contact me. So, for example, a school quite recently contacted me because sadly a child has died by suicide and they wanted to do the Helping Children with Loss course for a number of their staffing team. That was a very bespoke situation. Sometimes I will advertise and say, "This is my next course dates. This is the time that we're doing." And one of the things that's really important is the course is usually quite small in number because we want people to be heard when we are on the course. So this is not a course where I talk the whole time. It's very much about how we interact with each other. In fact, over the course of the 4 weeks of the course, we really get to know each other. And I say over 4 weeks, It's not 4 full weeks long. I usually book it the same day for 2 hours for 4 consecutive weeks. So let's say it's a Tuesday evening, 6 till 8, 4 consecutive Tuesdays, just to keep it easy for the people
Right.
that are attending, that type of thing. And what happens in the course is I guide the practitioners through a book called When Children Grieve. It is written by a gentleman called John W. James and Russell Friedman. They are the founders of the Grief Recovery Institute. And I guide the practitioner through that reading, and we learn from each other about our journey. Why have we made it to a grief recovery course? What is the reason for us being there? We talk about that, and then it's very structured. So which I love. I absolutely love that about it. It's very structured. Everybody gets the same deal. It's not a course that, we're getting different things each time. Everyone gets the same deal. That's what's wonderful about it. And obviously the content, I have 100% positive feedback of every course that I have delivered, the Helping Children with Loss course. I also do some bespoke offers of training for schools who are dealing with a particular sadness. So, for example, if a teacher has died, or a parent has died, or a child has died, sometimes schools are very much, where do we start with this? Not really sure. And I do often feel very sorry for the leaders in that respect. Often, as leaders of those establishments, they're expected to just get on with it again, be strong. And actually, what about their grief? What about the effect it's had on them and how they feel? And I think that hopefully the grief information team will be able to support schools, more and more schools, as we grow. We are very small at the moment, but I anticipate we will grow quite quickly over the next couple of years. That'd be good.
I suppose, yes, I can see that with the book, the material that you're putting out. You mentioned that the course is small. To give an idea, what is the range of the size of participants?
Max online, maximum 12. In person, we could probably push to about 15, 16. I wouldn't go any higher than that, just because we want everybody to be able to feel that they have got their voice heard. And the other thing, when you get too big, the time increases. And 2 hours for a course for me is long enough. We do tend to, if we do in person, suggest 2.5 hours per session, because when you're in person, there does seem to be a little bit more lost time. So we do have a little bit longer for those sorts of, just so that people feel like they can say what they want and we're not rushing. We don't want anybody to feel rushed.
Right. What's the furthest you traveled to provide training?
Well, that's a great question. I have traveled to mostly the northwest of England. I haven't done any down south in person. In terms of traveling, because I'm trained to deliver online, when it comes to the travel, that impacts on my time and costs. So it's easier to go online once we're getting outside of the northwest of the UK.
I
Good
guess.
question.
Thank you. You mentioned great feedback. Any examples that come to mind as far as areas you've been able to help and the feedback you've received from what you've given them?
I've got lots of that available on my LinkedIn if anybody wants to have a nosy on my LinkedIn page. But one I think that probably is repeated is that this is a course where I got something from it, both professionally and personally. And I think that I would be brave enough to suggest that I could guarantee that. So anybody that attends a Helping Children with Loss course, or grief recovery courses, or even grief recovery one-to-one, so anybody who is really sad and needs that support on a one-to-one basis, I also do deliver that. That is when people say to me, wow, this is a course where you gain something professionally and personally.
Thank you. Has this work impacted your management of your own grief?
100%.
How so?
One of the things that the grief recovery method does for us is it provides us with an opportunity to deliver our unheard communications. When you think about a situation when we are grieving, often The reason for that grief is the loss of the love and connection of the person that has died, or the person that we are separating from, or even the thing that we have lost. When we think about a child, for example, who's lost their most important teddy, and how distressed they can sometimes be when they have left it on the bus or the train, or it's gone missing and they can't find it, and how distressed they get. It doesn't necessarily have to be a person, it can be a thing. What we don't realize is that love and connection is a human behavior need. And when we suddenly have that severed from us in the form of a grief situation, that triggers our reaction in an emotional way. So for me, the grief recovery method enabled me to put right some of those
Mm.
things that I needed to say that I hadn't said, some of those things that I wished I'd have done. And it provided me, and I know lots of grief recovery method specialists and people who have done the grief recovery method but not become specialists have said that that opportunity to be heard
Mhm.
is incredibly important. How many people do you know who have been through grief and tell you the same thing over and over? When people repeat themselves, it's because they haven't felt heard in the first place. And so we've got to get better at listening. As a human race, we have to get better at listening. I think we've got to get better at communicating. Communicate to each other. Tell somebody that you love them today,
Yes,
so that they know, so that you know they know, and they know you know, and that's not an undelivered communication because you did it. Yeah, these are the things that I think we're not doing enough of.
I would agree. I want to circle back to something you said early on, and I would like for you to expand and use this as an opportunity to just encourage, if possible, the difference of the experience in your grieving process in isolation versus having community.
That's a good question as well. I went into grieve alone mode. And the reason why I did that is because that's what my mum did. So when my mum's brother died, she hid away in her room. We didn't really go in much. It was that business where if you're crying, you need to be out of the way. So we don't share and show that emotion. And I think that that's still a massive problem. One of the first things people do when they cry is apologize.
Mm,
When we apologize, when we cry, we give the child the view that crying is something to be sorry for.
okay.
And just repeat your question again, make sure I've answered
You
it
know,
properly.
the question was when I wanted to circle back to the idea when you were speaking before regarding when your sister and your mom passed, that the children, your husband went away, they came back, and you realized that isolation was not the best coping way for you. And oftentimes people isolate during grief
Yes, they
and the importance of community and how that serves you in your lived experience.
yeah, telling people how you feel and what is going on for you is really, really, really important. And I think we have to unpick a little bit about why we are grieving how we're grieving. What was the reason why I grieved how I grieved? Well, when I've looked back, actually, my mum did that. I hadn't even realised until I'd repeated that behaviour when my sister died. It was after the death of my sister that I realised I'm doing the same thing here. And therefore, I'm getting the same thing. We do the same thing, we get the same thing. And that wasn't serving me. So I knew I needed to find some help somewhere. And one thing that happened to me, I had a really lovely friend who recognized one day that I was again going into looking after others. So because I've been a teacher for a long time, I'm used to that looking after the children first thing. And she just said to me, have you ever thought about looking after your own grief first so that you are more suitably skilled to be able to support the children? Now, this
Very good,
person's not
friend.
in grief, not got any background in any grief at all, and she doesn't realise how impactful that statement was. That actually you need to do this for you first. And one of the things that we do in the training and the grief recovery method, John James mentions it in his book, is we put our own mask on first in order to be able to support others. It's like what they say on the aeroplanes, put your own mask on, because you're not going to be able to support your young person or another adult unless you can breathe.
Yes,
Well, we need to do that more and more. As adults, we have to start to look after ourselves better. And I don't think we're doing that at all. And I don't think that's just linked to grief either.
I would agree. I would agree. Thank you for this conversation. When you thought of this discussion, were there other topics that you wanted to cover that we have not discussed?
No, I don't think so. I just would like to just mention the books are available via Amazon.
Oh,
We are also looking at hopefully providing more support in terms of the adult support guides, and we do have some other plans soon. We're looking at trying to get our website. Our website is in urgent need of a bit of TLC. So hopefully soon all of these will be available via our own website. So if anybody is watching and interested, please do follow me on LinkedIn. I do update on a really regular basis.
okay. And I would like for you to provide us with the list of the books so then we can put them in the show notes. And
Uh,
then also on our website, we have a link for resources and we have the Amazon link for each item. And if you're welcome into that, we can place that there on our website and make them
Brilliant.
available. They would pay
Oh,
the same price, it just clicks right to Amazon for them.
yeah. And
Okay.
at the moment, Tina, one of the things, so one of the things that's really exciting for us, because we've only been doing this for a few months, we're both a bit new to this world of business. So when we look at our analytics on Amazon, we can find out where our people are buying the books from. And at the moment, the USA is actually beating the UK. So we're selling more of our books in the USA than we are in the UK at the moment. So thank you to those of you who've already bought one. It's absolutely wonderful news. And the other day, somebody in New Zealand bought one of them, and we were both like, "Oh, I never even thought of New Zealand." So we were very excited. The more these books can get into the hands of children, the better it will
I
be.
can The analytics in all aspects are exciting. I know when we review our analytics once a month, and we're now up to 89 different countries where our content is seen in over 3 million views. And you think, oh, we're talking about grief. No one's going to be thrilled about this. But it's the thing that we all have to experience. And the more we become educated, the more we become empowered, the more we normalize and validate this process, I think we embrace it and it allows us to manage it in a way that serves our people that are no longer here or the experiences we have in life. And as you said earlier on, that sometimes this grief or this anger or being upset is seen as negative emotions, where it's just as important as love. It's a part of who we are as human beings.
Yeah.
One other question you mentioned about the book. How does an adult or teacher walk the child through the book or the process? What does that look like?
That's a great question, and we're nearly finished with the adult support guide for
Mm.
this one. I'll be honest, it's been a process that I knew was necessary, but I didn't realize how difficult and how long it would take me because we need to get it right. And so, if I'm being really honest, I'm quite nervous about that coming out. The adult support guide, we hope to get out by probably August. So
Okay.
it's a few months away yet in terms of publication. But once we've got one done, hopefully we will backtrack and make sure that they're available for all of the books so that
Okay.
the adult who wants some support to help the child through the journals is able to purchase the adult support guide, and that will be an option on Amazon and via our own website. So they're on their way.
Okay.
They're on
Um,
their
Great. I've asked you quite a few questions. By chance, any questions of me?
That's a really do you know, it's funny, that's happened to me now 2 or 3 times on podcasts, and I really do need to write some down. But I would love to know just a little bit about you, what you do, and why you set up, Widowhood Real Talk. What pushed you into in this world?
My husband and I were together for 32 years. and we were on vacation, a little weekend getaway. We were in the process, we lived in Pennsylvania, and our children were becoming adults, and we were about to become empty nesters. And we lived in the area of Virginia, which is around DC, Virginia area there. And was able to secure a job there first, and I was looking to secure a job also. But it was the weekend before Easter, and we met halfway in the States in the area of Delaware. And he went into cardiac arrest, and he did not come home from that vacation. And my life was altered in a way that I had never considered possible. I am a retired officer from the Army. I run projects. I'm a leader, but I found myself mentally just gone. And it shocked me, and it also scared me. But when I read and understood the reality, the grief fog, grief brain, the cognitive parts of that, how my prefrontal cortex is impacted by grief and my amygdala, the more I became educated, I wasn't afraid of how I was feeling. I understood that this was a normal process in grief to this magnitude. The more I became educated, didn't make the experience go away. It just let me know that I was normal. And my community has stayed strong. My siblings, my friends, and in fact, even have gained friends. But in that process, I've done different speaking events and just been there and held space for people, and found more often than not, people are isolated not by choice, but because their community does not know how to support them. And they often don't have the voice to convey the need that they require during this journey. And out of those different events or opportunities, Widowhood Real Talk with Tina was developed, which is a nonprofit in the US. It's called a 501c3, where you're registered with the legal tax agencies and local and federal government agencies. And we provide resources, we conduct events, we have content across 6 different platforms, and this podcast that comes out weekly, because we also have just come out of a worldwide pandemic. And where do we go for resources? The internet. We look to know that there is someone that understands our journey or can relate to us. So between being on 6 different platforms, we're able to connect with people that then join our private Facebook group. We have grief support group meetings twice a month. The second Thursday of the month, we have a men's only grief support group that is hosted by a widower, Mr. James Price. And then I host the grief support group at the end of the month. We connect with mental health professionals. We share resources on our page. There are resources aligned to children, to parents, teenagers, the loss of a pet, and then dating, the aspect of that. I put out a weekly video on YouTube about dating because I did get remarried. And that's often a question that people ask me. How do you go from being in love with this man and his life ended to your surprise after 32 years together, and then find love again organically at the big age of 51? I am 58. So to be newly married is never what I thought it was. And most importantly, to let people know, to learn how to live off of the person's love versus that grief. Because when they transition, their grief takes up everything in the room. And not that we will ever get over it, but we can learn to manage that. We can learn to start leaning into those memories and lean into start taking back some of our life, the places we didn't go because it's so painful when they're not here. And I do coaching and work with people through that process. A widow that I'm working with, she has not slept in her bedroom in over a year and a half. And I understand that. But recently she cleaned up the bedroom and showed me the pictures of before and after. And I'm just thrilled to be able to help people in this very difficult journey.
Me too. It's wonderful work, absolutely wonderful work. And there are lots of people who need that support and not very many people who are offering that support. So certainly a privilege to be able to support people through their grief and loss. And for me, supporting the children is my primary purpose. And if that means that we need to support the adults who are supporting the children, then that's the way in which we will do it. And hopefully the journals and other resources that we will certainly create as we learn and grow, they will be super, super, super helpful to those people who need them.
Yes. One other question came to mind. Is there an age group for the books that you are developing?
Yes. So these kids' journals are aimed at children aged 7 to 11.
Okay.
We have plans to create teen journals when we finish this series. So we're 5 in. We have at least 10, possibly 12 to do. And then we will start to consider the teen journals. And that will be probably from around about 2025 by the time we get to the teen journals. But we are working very hard behind the scenes to get them done as quickly as possible. But we don't want to compromise on quality. That's incredibly important. And getting the right things in is also incredibly important. When a person is terminally ill journal, we actually went over the number of pages by quite a few. It's 130 pages long. And as our ideas develop, that's one of our problems. It's keeping the books to a reasonable size, because when you get much bigger, the printing costs start to change. When the printing costs start to change for us, we potentially have to change the cost of the book, and I don't want to do that. I want them all to be the same price. That's quite important to us. So that's where we're at, really. It's tricky. The more research I do, the more I think, oh, we need to put that in. Oh, we need to put that in. So yeah, that's. But hopefully, people are finding them helpful, and that's what matters. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for this conversation, and I will let you give the closing comments to our audience.
I would just like to send lots of love. This is what we do. So lots of love, or some people do this, love. So sending lots of love to anybody who is currently grieving any type of loss. It is normal what you are dealing with. Any feelings are okay. And if you need support, please do reach out to someone. Anybody that you know will listen to you, any establishments that you know will help. Do not grieve alone. It is not helpful. It does not serve you. And there are people out there that can offer that love and support and guidance. Please do take it. It's very important.
Thank you.
Thanks ever so much, Tina. It's been so lovely to chat to you.
Same here.
Take care. Hopefully we'll catch up on LinkedIn at some point.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune into Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.